Okay, this is the first part. I will be posting 2 chapters today and then another 2 tomorrow. Warning: blood, murder, mentions of Sa. It was terrifying how easy it was for them to find victims. All they had to do was sit somewhere in a bar and wait. Sooner or later, every time, someone would approach one of them. Obviously, if there was ever a time when no one took the bait, there would be no reason to kill. However, that had yet to happen after many years of doing this hunting. Or so they'd been calling it since the media picked up on the string of serial killings, labeling the killer as the bar hop hunter. Katsuki couldn't really care less for the name, but Izuku loved it. It did mean that the police weren't really onto them since they hadn't even figured out yet that there were 2 of them, not just one bar hop hunter. Both Katsuki and Izuku became really nervous after their killings had been discovered. They'd gotten by for years completely undetected. Luckily, other than the fact that they always gathered victims from a bar, the police really didn't have anything on them. It's not like Katsuki wanted to kill. His dream was to be the #1 hero of all time. He wasn't a murderer. Well, he was technically a murderer, but that wasn't all he aspired to be. Hey, Kaken. Are you ready? Izuku met him at the front of his sidewalk. Per the usual. They were on the hunt tonight, also the usual. Yeah, nerd. Course. Let's go. They left well after dark, taking the least crowded route to the least crowded train station this time of night to get to their destination. Like usual, this involved a lot of walking, but it was worth it to be discreet. The location tonight was a rundown bar joint on the other side of town. They'd used this one before, though they tried not to use the same ones too often. It was just that the rundown bars always had pedophiles to kill and didn't care much about obviously fake IDs. When they got to the bar, literally called the detention center like they thought they were being funny, Izuku and Katsuki had no trouble getting in. There wasn't even a bouncer and no one kicked them out despite fairly obviously being teenagers. It wasn't safe or smart to just waltz in looking like themselves, so they had disguises just enough to make themselves unidentifiable. 2 dark brown wigs. Brown color eye contacts. Plain clothes. Izuku usually made the choice to keep his freckles visible, however. He said it made it all the more satisfying when he got to kill an old man who complimented them. Izuku sat down at a table near the entrance. Katsuki found a bar stool to keep warm at the other end of the bar. Sometimes they hunted side by side, but usually they did it this way. Better to have someone on standby without the attention of their victim on him yet. They just had to see who was approached first. It really didn't take long. That part was the worst. Katsuki honestly would stop doing this if it didn't work. If they had to lure people out or go out of their way to find them. But no, as usual, the victim found them. It was a younger man who approached Izuku tonight. Every time, it was almost too easy. Like it was bait for them, the killers. But this guy slid in next to the freckled boy and slung an arm around the back of his chair like he owned him. It made Katsuki bristle, but he tried to hide that he was even looking that way. The guy was younger than a lot of their victims' older 20s, more likely young 30s. He had dots all over his skin, lime green like his hair. It probably had something to do with whatever his quirk was, but honestly Izuku was still much better at analyzing that shit than Katsuki was. Izuku was really the better actor of the 2 of them, but Katsuki liked to think he was pretty good, too. Even from here, Katsuki could see Izuku's drunkenness, his mouth forming slurred words as he struggled to keep himself upright. It was fake, of course, as was the drink in his hands. Or rather, it had real alcohol in it, that Izuku would pour on himself bit by bit so he smelled like the stuff but he would never drink it. Same as Katsuki, who had a drink sitting on the bar in front of him. Though since Izuku was chosen tonight, he himself wouldn't have to be faking it so he didn't even touch it. Which is why he was glad their little escapades were gladly funded by the men's wallets they found once they killed them. They really only had 2 rules: make sure their victim knew they were underage and or drunk, and leave no evidence. Again, Katsuki really didn't think that it should have been this easy, but it was. In all their time doing this, there were only a few times the guy that approached one of them backed off after finding out they were underage. And that was few and far between. Izuku left the bar stumbling with this lime green guy, the guy practically dragging Izuku by the elbow. It made something nauseous form in Katsuki's gut. Even after doing this for several years now, this was the hardest part for him. It would all be worth it when they could kill him. No one in the bar stopped the guy from dragging an obviously drunk teenager away, per the usual. That made Katsuki want to throw up, too. Why did no one care? He gave it a few seconds before following them, letting Izuku have the head start. Sometimes these guys had a car, which made it more difficult to follow, but they could make anything work. It seemed this guy lived in walking distance as he kept up past the turn for the main train station. Katsuki almost wished this guy was bold enough to drag Izuku to an alleyway. Somehow it was more satisfying to leave their bodies there. But this guy took Izuku into an apartment complex. Katsuki made sure to follow from a good distance, but closed the distance more and more. Soon enough it wouldn't matter if the guy saw him or not, it was just important that no one else saw him, just in case. He got close enough to see Izuku get dragged into an otherwise ordinary apartment door. Katsuki approached, counted to 30, then opened it. Izuku, being drunk and clumsy, was usually able to covertly unlock the doors behind them if their victim locked it, in order to let Katsuki inside. It looked like he had perfect timing. Izuku and the victim were in the kitchen, Izuku drunkenly asking for more alcohol and the guy obediently finding some and poured them each a glass. Silent as he could, Katsuki locked the door behind him and made his way in. After the guy drank his glass and Izuku didn't touch his, Katsuki knew it was over. They did it. Smooth sailing today. Easy as pie. Katsuki almost wished that it hadn't. Sometimes he liked getting physical just a little too much. Poison was plan A, but it didn't always work. Actually, most of the time it didn't work. Sometimes they had a hard time convincing even an unsuspecting victim to take a drink. Sometimes their victim had a quirk that repelled or detected poisons in some way, meaning they had to act fast. But they always found a way. A knife in the heart was a good plan B. Strangulation, drowning, electrocution, and suffocation worked, too. Plus, Katsuki always had his quirk, though that was usually more of a last resort. He didn't want anyone making a connection to it. Today's victim did a double take as Katsuki strode into the kitchen like he owned the place. Oh, what the? Who the fuck are you? Get out of my... Katsuki kept his eyes on the guy as he doubled over, choking. The freckled boy was all done faking being drunk. Izuku had done his job. So Katsuki stepped over to him and they wrapped their arms around each other's shoulders to watch the guy die. What's happen? The victim choked and coughed as he clutched at his throat. Hooah! Bending his head down low to meet the lime green guy's eyes, Katsuki slid a sly smirk on his face, feeling every bit of excitement coursing through his veins. We're your killers, loser. You don't get to rape anyone tonight. In fact, you get to die. The victim's eyes widened as he stopped being able to form words. The lime green dots around his skin turned a weird pallid color. He reached out towards the two boys with a desperate, shaking hand. Katsuki didn't know if it was to ask for help or to hurt, but either way, this guy was already dead. Foam formed out of his mouth as he fell to the floor, twitching for a minute before becoming deathly still. The apartment was quiet then. Peaceful. Well? Katsuki asked his freckled companion, shall we? Sure, Kaken. I only touched the lock on the door and the countertop once to steady myself. Otherwise we're good. Perfect. There were multiple benefits of having a dual murder team working together. Obviously for safety reasons it was just better to have two, one for backup as needed. But also because then between the two of them they could carry everything that they needed in between their pockets. Izuku liked to carry the poisons and chloroform. Katsuki liked to carry their weapons, like knives. He would also help out by carrying more practical stuff like their gloves and small cleaning supplies in his multiple pockets and a makeshift compartment in his boots. The two put on rubber gloves and got to work cleaning those surfaces and the door handle Katsuki touched. Izuku had already swiped the guy's wallet, so all they had to do was check if this apartment complex had cameras. They otherwise kept everything as it was, especially the body. They made a point to keep the bodies where they died. There was just something special about a rapist dying in their own kitchen after drinking their own liquor, that Izuku put a capsule of poison in, of course. This particular apartment complex did not in fact have any cameras, so all they had to do then was have Katsuki destroy their gloves and shoe coverings with his quirk and they were good to return home. All in all, it was a successful run that night. Pretty smooth, as far as murders go, though Katsuki couldn't help but feel a little disappointed that he hadn't been able to stab anyone or slice their throat. There would be other opportunities in the future. They parted ways at Izuku's apartment, the green-haired boy pulling the blonde into a quick hug and kissing his cheek before making his way inside. Katsuki wished he could have spent the night. He liked falling asleep next to the other boy and making sure he was okay. Izuku had nightmares, sometimes. He didn't really talk about them much, but Katsuki could only assume it had to do with what happened all those years ago. After all, he had those nightmares, too. But for tonight they'd go their separate ways. In the morning, both of them would check the news to see if the police caught on that the man's death was the bar hop hunter's doing, but in the meantime they both needed to go home and get some rest. After all, tomorrow was a big day. The first day at UA High School. Shota Aizawa worked too hard, or at least in his own opinion. It's not that he didn't love teaching. It's not that he didn't love being a pro hero. But both at the same time was just a lot of work. Especially when he gets pulled into detective work on the side. It was his own fault, really. He wasn't even part of the case, not even a little bit. It was literally just from watching the news and hearing crime reports so often that he put it all together. There was a serial killer, one that killed men right after they came home from a bar. He didn't really know why or how or who, but it was obvious that the murders were very much related. The MO was too similar. They didn't even believe him at first when he called the police line, saying it was too random. Aizawa ended up having to put together evidence, compiled from literally public access news, to form a case. And he proved it. There was a string of killings going on for the last few years with a very consistent pattern. A man who was known to be at a bar goes home and is murdered. Usually the man is found with poison in his system, whether that was how he ultimately died or not. The killer didn't seem to be above kitchen knives, hammers, rope, and occasionally this odd burning pattern. He did have to admit there was no other consistency. Not between any of the victims or where they lived. That didn't mean it wasn't worth looking into. So Aizawa himself was put on the case. Great. Right now all he really wanted was a good nap. But instead he carried all the boxes of evidence he'd picked up from the police station and hauled them into his office. He could already feel the weight of the lack of sleep catching up to him. There were literally hundreds of case files in the boxes he found. Maybe not all of them matched up with his killer, but his hunch said that most of them did. He couldn't say for sure that there was no connection between the victims, only to say that he hadn't found one yet. The only connection was when they all died after returning from a night out at a bar. And even that didn't have a lot of consistency, which was why the police hadn't really picked it up in the first place. Plus the fact that all of the victims had missing wallets made it challenging to pinpoint as a serial killer case. Missing wallets were more typical of robberies, not serial killings. Aizawa was the first one to point out that in all of these cases, only the wallets were missing. However, nothing else was stolen out of any of their homes. But every single one of them started a night out at a bar of some sort the night that they died. Some of the victims were long-time patrons of various bars and had been frequenting a bar every night for years. Those were the first victims Aizawa was able to string together since their last known whereabouts was well known. There were other victims too that had been confirmed by various witnesses, co-workers, friends, etc. who could confirm that the victim was going to a bar that night despite being found dead at home. There were even more cases that weren't found in their homes. Victims found dead in alleyways or behind drinking establishments. Those files hadn't been factored into the overall bar hop hunter case yet, but Aizawa felt it would be negligent to discount them. The killer was named the bar hop hunter, too trite for a serial killer, in his opinion. But it's not like even him being the lead detective gave him any say in the name. His job was apparently to do everything else: compile all the evidence, investigate the crime scenes, interview witnesses. He was supposed to be able to call up underlings in the police force to do more of the grunt work for him, but every time he did, they'd call back and say they didn't have any leads or they'd call way too often needing direction. At this point it was really up to him to get anything done. There wasn't much to go based off of yet, unfortunately, but there was literally years of evidence to catch up to. This was going to be a lot of work. Which was why Azor thought he worked too much. UA classes were starting up again. He had quite the interesting lineup in his homeroom. So not only did he have to juggle some sort of serial killer with no solid evidence pointing to an identity at this point, he also had to handle 20 young pupils who were more likely than not going to cause him trouble. They always did. This was going to be fun. Both Izuku and Katsuki were very smart, literally breaking records for intelligence in their tiny school's record books. The two of them were well known for being neck and neck in test scores for years now, both certified geniuses well on their way to studying at the top high school in the country. The combination of their intelligence plus their years of experience now made them virtual experts in the field of murder. So they knew how to clean up after themselves. They knew how to hide the evidence. They also knew that the police were looking for patterns, on top of physical evidence, meaning that the two of them had to be as unpatterned as possible. Random bars, random times, random methods of killing. That also meant they couldn't just skip out on important days, just in case the police were watching for that sort of thing, that sort of pattern. For instance, the start of school. Because of their drive and intelligence, getting into UA was relatively easy. Katsuki was basically a shoo-in with his explosion quirk, worshipped by teachers and peers alike. Rather recently, actually the morning of the UA entrance exam a few weeks ago, Izuku had been given a quirk by All Might himself, some kind of strength stockpiling quirk called One for All. Katsuki was still trying to wrap his mind around the fact that Izuku was not only no longer quirkless, he actually had a great potential to become extremely powerful. While he himself was training and studying, the freckled boy was doing the same under the guidance of the number one hero, the one they both always looked up to. Katsuki wasn't actually supposed to know anything about it. It was supposed to be a generations-long secret that Izuku was never allowed to tell anyone, but of course he told Katsuki since they told each other everything. They always have. There was a bit of time in their younger friendship that hit rocky times. Back then, Izuku was like a squashed bug to Katsuki for all he cared. Just a quirkless, useless crybaby. But after the incident, after that happened to Izuku, they became closer than ever and stayed that way ever since. Katsuki and Izuku planned to commute to UA together for their first day, but first he had to check the news. The blonde readied himself for school as the local station played on the small screen of his phone, the sound tinny but audible. At first it was just the usual weather updates, sports, opinions on politics and the like. But the second he heard Bar Hop Hunter, Katsuki nearly dropped his toothbrush. The police found evidence of another Bar Hop Hunter murder last night, this one a young man of 31. The news anchor's voice was nearly monotone, bored, but compelling to Katsuki all the same. The lead hero detective on the case reports this evidence claiming that it fits the MO of the alleged serial killer. We have footage of the press conference from late last night. The scene switched from a newsroom to a press conference with police officers standing on either side of someone who could only be a pro-hero, though he appeared to be a bit scraggly with deep dark circles under his eyes. "I am pro-hero Eraserhead," the man grumbled into the microphone, his voice gravely and deep. "I have been named the lead pro-hero detective on the Bar Hop Hunter case and would like to inform the public that we have every available resource focused on taking down such a dangerous killer. There is evidence indicating that the killer did strike again last night and we are compiling all the evidence now to point us in the direction of his identity. We will inform you of updates as they arise. Thank you." The pro-hero also sounded bored, like the newscaster, but in a different way. Like he was being forced up there in front of the reporters, reading from a script. As if he really didn't want to be there. Katsuki already knew that the police were starting a case on them, but the fact that they had a lead detective, a pro-hero in fact, was important news. Izuku and him would need to be very careful to avoid this guy, especially as they would be beginning their hero careers shortly. Even hero students interacted with pro-heroes on a regular basis. But still, the fact that they had a name and a face of the pro-hero investigating them put them on an advantage to avoid the guy if at all possible. Katsuki closed the news app on his phone and tucked the phone away in his pocket. It was time for school. "Good morning, Kaken." Izuku was nearly a different person in the daylight compared to who he was during their evening escapades, all fluffy hair and crinkles next to his eyes when he smiled. It was as if he was as innocent as they come and not an actual serial killer. Morning. Katsuki grunted as he bumped the other's hip the second he made his way down to the end of his sidewalk. They walked toward the train station together, ironically the same path they took the night before to go kill someone. The freckled boy's expression was honest, excited. Both of them had been waiting for this day their whole lives. UA. Heroes. Being taught by heroes so that one day they could stand in their footsteps. Of course Katsuki was excited too, but he was a little embarrassed at how much Izuku was chittering about in public. It was making people stare. Either that or the fact that they were holding hands. It couldn't be that weird that teenage boys would do that. There was no reason to stare. Hey, so. Did you see the news this morning? Katsuki nudged Izuku a bit as they got onto the train. Izuku gripped his hand back in return before smiling his teeth into a grimace. He spoke in a low voice, so they wouldn't be overheard. Yeah. Pro hero Eraserhead. That might be a problem. Despite being underground, he's thorough and tough from what I can tell. We're just going to have to do our best to avoid him. I was thinking the same thing. They made it to school in one piece and found their classroom together, their assigned seats luckily right in front of the other. After all this time side by side, Katsuki literally couldn't imagine being without the other boy, not after everything they'd been through together. Katsuki was only okay with dealing with Izuku, he really wasn't interested in the extras that would be their fellow classmates. So he should have known that he wouldn't have handled their new classmates well. Immediately upon arriving, everyone was vying for Izuku's attention, partially because he was so kind and friendly, but also just because he's freckled and adorable and blushed whenever anyone talked to him. Several people, including some brunette chick with round cheeks and a dorky guy with square glasses, talked to Izuku for way too long, nearly an entire minute. It was too long for Katsuki. The blonde had been defending Izuku against creeps and other people who meant harm for too long to stand watching him with those people like that. Deku. Oh, hi Kaken, do you wanna meet your Erika and Aida? Glasses dared approach him with a stiff outstretched hand. Hello. I am Aida. Don't play all nice, you fucking extra. Katsuki slung an arm around Izuku's shoulders, pulling him towards himself and away from the extras. Izuku laughed, pushing Katsuki lightly at the chest. Kaken, stop, it's okay. They really are nice. Yeah right. There were only two reasons someone approached Izuku: to hurt the boy because they found him attractive or to hurt him because he was quirkless. Except, Izuku wasn't quirkless anymore, was he? All these morons knew was that Izuku was in the same class as them, UA's class 1A. Was that really all it took? Suddenly people aren't going to look down on the freckled boy because he has a quirk? That just made Katsuki angrier. He opened his mouth to give them a piece of his mind, but a monotone voice cut through the noise of the busy classroom. If you all don't get in your seats in the next 3 seconds, I'm expelling all of you. There was a man in the front of the classroom wrapped up in a yellow sleeping bag. He had dark circles under his eyes, scraggly hair that looked like it hadn't been washed in days, and a mouth pulled into what could only be a perpetual frown. I expect every one of you to be in your seats when class starts, not milling about. You are not here to make friends, he grumbled. I'm Mr. Aizawa, I'll be your homeroom teacher this year. If you've heard any rumors about me, they are all true. I will expel you if I believe you have no future as a hero. Their teacher. Their homeroom teacher. This was the man from the press conference, the lead detective in charge of their case. The pro hero that was investigating them. Eraserhead. This was gonna be fun. Katsuki didn't have any time to panic. Their homeroom teacher was also the exact pro hero assigned to investigate them. The very same pro hero they were planning to avoid for as long as they could, which turned out to be less than a day. But there wasn't any time to panic about it. First of all, both he and Izuku had to remain perfectly calm as class started. They were pretty good actors after doing it all of these years, but still, it was hard to not even make meaningful eye contact with the green-haired boy. Katsuki just had to trust that the other boy knew to stay calm, too. They also barely had time at all, period. Mr. Azor immediately instructed them to go to the locker rooms to change into gym clothes and meet him outside. With such a precarious situation, Katsuki didn't even attempt serious communication with Izuku. They were really better off just playing the nice hero students that the school and their homeroom teacher expected them to be. Well, as nice as Katsuki could pretend to be. The class together found where the locker rooms were located. Izuku of course wasn't very comfortable changing around other people, so he found a stall for privacy, leaving Katsuki out in the main area. Which is where it first started. Do you think the girls' gym clothes are gonna be hot? I bet they're gonna be smoking. I mean, I guess, man. But Katsuki side-eyed the two mid-conversation. The boy who responded had bright yellow blonde hair with what looked like a lightning bolt adorning the side. The original boy who spoke was rather small with round purple balls in place of hair. The purple boy was still raving about girls and gym clothes, though no one was really edging him on about it, even Lightning Boy. And what do you wanna bet we share a locker room with them, What are the chances someone else conveniently placed some kind of peephole? Dude. What are you talking about? You can't do that, wait. So much for lying low. Katsuki was 2 seconds from pulverizing this guy if he really thought he could freely spy on the girls in the other room. Luckily, the lightning bolt guy beat him to it, saving him the trouble. Stop, dude. Listen, I know you're excited about the girls, but have some class. Lightning Boy bodily blocked Purple Pervert from trying to search the walls. I'm excited to be in the same class as girls, too. But you can't just go spying on them. Purple Pervert was visibly drooling, ignoring the other boy completely. But, girls. They are so gorgeous. I just want a peek. Katsuki was seriously about to break every rule Izuku and he ever came up with. He was about to kill this guy here and now. Consequences be damned. That's enough. Square Glasses with the formal attitude yelled out with enough force to stop all of them. He pushed his glasses further up on his face as he held out a stiff arm with the other, indicating to hold. Now, I'm sure Mr. Azor is looking for punctuality. He already threatened to expel students. Let's go. That seemed to be enough to let the whole debacle die down, actually saving Katsuki from making what was probably going to be a bad move. Izuku came out of the stall changed and confused at the commotion. Katsuki just rolled his eyes at him and mouthed that he'd tell him later. It turned out their teacher wanted to put them through some kind of fitness test, like they used to do in gym class, only this time they were allowed to use their quirks. Easy enough for Katsuki, he'd mastered his quirk a long time ago. Izuku did well enough, but given the newness of his quirk he hadn't quite figured it out yet, making it dangerous. He ended up breaking a finger to finish the fitness tests and seemed to accidentally get himself under the eye of the teacher. At least it was only because he had poor control of his quirk and not for any other reason, but still. It would have been better if they could lie low. Purple Pervert ogled the girls the entire time, openly, making all of them clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Azor separated the creep from the girls and reprimanded him once, but it was clear to Katsuki that the perverted boy wasn't going to let up. Katsuki nudged the green-haired boy once as they split ways, Izuku to go to the school's clinic to heal his broken finger, and Katsuki to go change in the locker rooms. He would have liked to go with Izuku instead, but he had to see if the Purple Pervert was going to try anything else. Of course he did. As soon as they all returned back into the locker rooms after the fitness test, Purple Pervert immediately ran to press his face against the wall adjacent to the girls' locker room. He was spewing some nonsense about how now he's seen the girls in their gym clothes. He had to see them without their gym clothes. He was shut down again by lighting Dalton Square Glasses, unfortunately avoiding an immediate death by Katsuki. Mr. Azor had dismissed them after that class period, so Katsuki met up again with Izuku for lunch. It turned out the school's doctor had a healing quirk that fixed Izuku's broken finger in an instant, though he got some kind of scolding for it. Katsuki would have reprimanded the green-haired boy, too, but it seemed he already understood the lesson. Clearly he needed to control his quirk better, despite his disadvantage of gaining the powers of his quirk very recently. They ate lunch together. Izuku talked his ear off about ways to work on his newfound power. Of course in public, he didn't describe it as such and was careful about what he said out loud. Several of their classmates decided to eat with them, which was annoying, but Izuku seemed excited to meet new friends, so the blonde let it pass. That just meant they would have to save talking about the problem of the homeroom teacher and the purple pervert for later. The rest of the day went by relatively smoothly. It turned out that some of their classes would be different, like hero studies, but other than the fact that mathematics was being taught by a literal pro hero, it was just math. Regular, easy. Katsuki kept the purple pervert in the corner of his eye the whole day, though, watching his every move. The girls very quickly rallied around each other and protected each other from his pervertedness, so Katsuki never actually had to step in. But still, he had to do something. It wasn't that he cared about these girls or anything, he barely even knew them. They were just extras in his story. He could still never let a creep like that get away with all the things he tried to do. Over the course of their first day, Katsuki saw him try to peep on the girls changing, check under their skirts, attempt to accidentally feel up someone's chest, and make gross sexist remarks all day long. The teachers told him to keep it down or focus on the lesson, but otherwise didn't do anything about it. Katsuki was getting sick of it. As soon as the last bell rang, Izuku and him raced out of the school, hand in hand. They ran all the way to the train station, Izuku laughing all the while like it was all in good fun. Both of them were too wound up to sit, so they stood in the train, bumping hips with every curve the train threw at them. Katsuki was sure the other boy had a lot on his mind, the same as him, but none of it was safe to discuss yet. It started to sprinkle a bit as they ran to Izuku's apartment, but not enough to soak through their clothes. Katsuki was relieved to find that Izuku's mom wasn't home from work yet. He just didn't feel like dealing with her today. The two of them found food and made their way to Izuku's bedroom, locking the door behind them. Neither of them spoke for a long while, choosing to collapse on the bedroom floor instead. Katsuki was still catching up with his breath from running all that way, and it seemed Izuku was, too. Katsuki could hear birds chirping outside and a light patter of rain. He felt like killing something. He wanted to stab something. Fuck. You got that right, Izuku agreed. Katsuki pushed himself up on his elbows to look down at the other boy. His eyes were closed, freckles prominent on his skin from the flushed race home. I wanna kill someone. Izuku sighed and flopped over to his stomach. But we just went out last night. We should rest tonight, maybe go out tomorrow. No, I mean Katsuki pushed himself over, too, onto his stomach. He pillowed his head on his arms so he was face to face with the other boy. I mean I want to kill someone. I want to kill that purple ball hair creep. Mineta? I don't care what his name is. I want to kill him. Izuku frowned and flicked Katsuki gently between the eyes. We've never killed a specific person before, well, not since. Why him? Why Mineta? Didn't you see him? Katsuki returned the favor, scooting his arm out to flick Izuku's forehead in return. Yeah, I mean. I did. He was awful, made all the girls uncomfy. But does that mean we need to kill him? I don't know about need to, I just want to. Izuku smirked at him, but also scrunched his face into his thinking expression. Okay. Kaken. I thought we were going to be on the same page about lying low. We literally just walked into a classroom where the lead investigator on our case is our teacher. Our homeroom teacher. He's literally known for watching students' every move. How does killing a fellow classmate help us to blend in? Katsuki didn't have an answer at first, so he rolled over again to lie half on top of the green-haired boy, smushing him into the carpet. Kaken. Izuku laughed. Seriously? What? Katsuki tried to stay serious but accidentally let out a chuckle of his own. You just make a good pillow is all. Are you threatening me until we make a plan to kill Mineta? I didn't say that, but now that you mention it. Katsuki pushed himself completely onto his back to squish Izuku even more. Okay. Izuku spluttered as he squirmed underneath him. We just have to be careful, alright? Katsuki rolled one more time, all the way over so he was on his belly again, on the other side of Izuku. The green-haired boy whipped his head around to follow him, making them face to face again. Of course we'll be careful, Deku. We always are. HMPH. Still, I think it's risky. It's already risky that we're under Eraserhead's watch. How's he gonna know? Listen, they've barely put our victims together. So far they only have the ones we hunted in their homes. There's no way for them to make the connection that Manita or whoever is connected. He doesn't fit the MO or whatever they said on TV. Listen, Kaken. We both know what the police are like. We both know how to outsmart them. It's not hard. But Eraserhead isn't going to be like the police we've encountered in the past. He's smarter than that. He's more perspective than them. I told you, we'll be careful. I already have an idea in mind. It'll work, Deku. Alright. But, I wanna see something first. What? Well, we're killing him because of how he treated those girls, right? Yeah, his fucking pervertedness and creepiness. Right. I just wanna see if he can get better. Get better? Deku, what the fuck does that mean? Well, what if he could improve? What if he could see the error in his ways? He hasn't proven to us that he's a rapist or that he plans on raping someone. Obviously he has the vibes. But before we do anything permanent, I wanna see if he can get better. Katsuki sighed and lifted his head enough to press his forehead into his hands. I guess. The second he touches you or any of those girls, I'm ripping his arm off. Got it, Deku? Got it, Kaken. They spent that evening starting their new math homework, eating dinner, and lounging around as they discussed plans for Purple Pervert and Eyebags Bastard, Katsuki's new name for their homeroom teacher and lead investigator. As for the bastard, there was absolutely no reason to think they'd be under his suspicion, but still. It was to their advantage that Izuku was bright-eyed and innocent, which he would play up as much as necessary. Both of them would just be average, normal, everyday students, who also both very much wanted top spots as pro heroes, but that was pretty much the norm in Class 1A anyway. Izuku's mom came home in the middle of the evening. Katsuki opted to take a shower and change while Izuku went to greet her. The blonde really didn't want anything to do with her. He had no idea how Izuku could even stand to be around her after everything she put him through. Somehow Katsuki dealt with his own parents, though, so maybe he wasn't one to talk. They settled in for the night in Izuku's bed, just large enough to barely fit the two of them. It was easy enough to make it work by laying on their side, Izuku's smaller frame tucked in Katsuki's. Katsuki agreed to give this Manita guy a week to improve with Izuku's plan. If not, the guy was already dead. Azora was at wit's end. Not only was he having to juggle his entire pro-hero career, teaching career, and apparent detective work, all of it was a jumbled chaotic mess. So far, he hadn't gotten anywhere in the bar hop hunter case. Even with a fresh crime scene, there was no evidence. He followed everything: potential bar witnesses, the path from the bar to the apartment, the poison itself, any cameras, fingerprints, DNA. Nothing. There was nothing that linked anything to anything. It didn't really help that he was effectively working alone. Apparently the police station he was connected to for the case was in an uproar about this case. Half the officers wanted in given the notoriety of it, although Azora was as picky as they come about who worked with him. Regardless, the entire station was famous now for the case, and they loved it. Azora wasn't sure how to feel about that. He just wanted the killer captured and brought to justice. He didn't give a rat's ass about the notoriety or financial gain the police station had to gain from this. And it really didn't help that any police officer who helped him just did so for the fame and barely did anything. Either way, the only productive thing he'd been able to do so far was organize the literal files. The fresh crime scene wasn't particularly fruitful, so he'd spent more time with the boxes of old evidence hoping to find a connection. Azora organized the boxes of evidence into 3 piles. 1. A pile for previous cases that really fit the MO and he was very certain was the bar hop hunter's doing. 2. A pile of cases that could fit, but not perfectly. Like a body that was found somewhere odd or the timing was off. There was actually one from this week that fit well enough, but the body was found in an alley and cut up to ribbons, so he didn't know if it fit or not yet. And 3. A pile of cases that really didn't fit the MO, but gave Azora pause, like he could use information from them. The police officers helping him gather the physical copies thought he was ridiculous for pulling the last ones out, but Azora wanted to use everything and anything to catch the killer. As he was sorting them, he really did find a case from many years ago that did make him pause. It was in the third pile, most likely completely unrelated to the bar hop hunter case. It didn't actually fit the MO at all. However, he immediately felt the sense that the case was important, and set it aside, but couldn't quite get himself to open it yet. Plus, he only had so much time. Pro-hero work was the same as always, but the bar hop hunter case cut into his patrol time. He barely had time for it. And UA. Why was it him who always got the trouble students? He had 2 students who threw up daily from quirk overexertion, 1 student who couldn't stop breaking his bones, another student who couldn't stop harassing the girls in the class, and another student who blew up in anger anytime he was addressed by anyone, including Azor himself. Minoru Mineta was the main problem right now. If he didn't stop harassing the girls, Azor would have no choice but to expel him. Azor of course had full autonomy over his classroom, but it's not like he liked to expel students. He really only did it when he believed a student had absolutely no future as a hero if they were a danger to themselves. No student of his was going to die an early death that he could have prevented by pulling them out early or making them learn a harsh lesson. That didn't really fit Mineta's case. It wasn't necessarily his hero skills, or his academic ones. He scored just fine in the fitness test and he did well on academic tests. But if he kept insisting on tormenting every girl he came across, none of that would matter. Azor did try to talk with him. He tried to reason with him at first. They had a sit-down meeting to go over proper classroom behavior. However, Mineta was completely unfocused the whole time and didn't seem to absorb a thing. So, he tried reprimanding him. It wasn't necessarily proper to tie up the young man in his capture weapon when Mineta went too far, but it wasn't exactly illegal either. The interesting part was that he wasn't the only one. Multiple students in Class 1A reprimanded the purple hair boy throughout the week, most of them the girls in the class who stuck up for each other or occasionally another boy when things got out of hand. The interesting one was Midoriya. The green-haired boy with a propensity for breaking his bones approached Mineta in very specific ways. At first Azor barely noticed, just assuming it was another student reprimanding Mineta for his treatment of the girls. But, it was more than that, somehow. He couldn't hear their interactions every time, but Midoriya was the only one who could make Mineta actually freeze in place and listen to him. Azor was more than curious to know what was being said, but more than anything he wanted to know if it would work. Maybe if Mineta's behavior improved soon, he could stay at least a while longer at UA. Unfortunately, it didn't. The purple-haired boy's behavior only ever improved directly after someone, particularly Midoriya, reprimanded him, but over the course of the first week at school, it never actually got better. Every day, Azor received complaints from the girls in Class 1A and various complaints from other classes as well. It was time he did something more permanent to stop the menacing young man. Of course, none of that mattered after he received the news that weekend. It didn't work. Whatever Izuku was trying with Mineta wasn't working. It didn't even put a dent in the purple pervert's perverted soul. Katsuki was honestly surprised. Izuku was so charming and charismatic. As soon as they started at UA their fellow classmates were jumping through hoops to please the freckled boy. But not Mineta. It seemed that that boy's pervertedness was stronger than his desire to stay on the green-haired boy's good side, which was saying a lot. And yes, certainly he seemed to try to listen to Izuku, but when it came down to it, he had to show that he was actually interested in being a better person, which Katsuki certainly didn't see. Izuku agreed with him. So, Friday's the final test for him, right? Izuku was laying out on Katsuki's bed. It was Katsuki's turn to have the other boy over, which was fine since it was easier to avoid his own parents than Mrs. Midoriya. His own parents didn't give two shits about what they were up to, so they never bothered them. Katsuki himself was spinning in his desk chair. Both of them had already finished studying for the day and were planning out the weekend. They'd gone out the night before and picked up some creep from a shady bar, their usual. It was actually Katsuki who'd been targeted that night, making it all the more satisfying when he got to stab up the guy in a back alleyway. Yeah, tomorrow. If that little purple fuck fails the final test for him, I'm killing him on the spot. Izuku laughed, rolling onto his side to look at the blonde with big doe eyes. I know. Is it bad that I almost hope he'll fail? He's getting kinda annoying. Yeah, fucking bastard. He hasn't touched you, has he? No, Kaken. He's very persistent with the girl obsession, so he's certainly tried to touch many of them. Tomorrow after school, that's the plan, right? Yeah. I think I have everything we need. It was easy to convince Izuku to stay the night. He was already set up in Katsuki's bed anyway. Katsuki slept so much better by Izuku's side, knowing he was safe. Comforting Izuku out of a nightmare was better like this, too. Class on Friday was uneventful. Katsuki could tell that Izuku was half-heartedly trying to convince Mineta to back off, but now more than anything, was focused on keeping him away from the girls instead of trying to get him to learn a lesson. Before, Izuku would coax Mineta out of a situation with his own charm and friendliness. He would try to convince the purple pervert that girls liked it when guys were more aloof or played hard to get. Izuku tried to talk Mineta into learning new ways of approaching girls, like talking to them. He even tried to get the purple pervert to talk to girls with him, so Izuku would be Mineta's wingman. But none of that worked, even remotely. All the pervert wanted to do was be a total creep. He wasn't interested in talking to the girls or getting to know them. All he wanted to do was get his grimy little hands on them. Katsuki knew guys like that. He got to meet them regularly on his and Izuku's regular escapes. He also regularly killed guys like that and was ready to do it again. Like always, it was easy. Izuku and him waited until dusk to set about their plan, certainly a different plan from their usual, though they still walked a long distance and took one short train ride. Instead of their usual disguises, they just wore plain clothes including beanies to cover their hair. They also weren't going to a bar this time, although their text to Mineta said otherwise. Did you send it? Katsuki shuffled his feet and shoved his hands in his pockets. He was already amped up and not interested in waiting. But he knew Izuku was right, being careful was the most important thing. And, sent. Now we wait for him to respond. Izuku was excited about this. Katsuki could tell. There was a twinkle in his eyes like it was a special day. Maybe it was. What did you say? Izuku held up his phone as he spoke. Here, see. I said hey, I'm Mineta. Are you busy tonight? I was just out at a club and thought I saw some of the girls from school. Some of them are looking really drunk and I just want to help them out. Do you think you can help me? Bah. That's ridiculous. If he just replies to that, I'm killing him. Oh, shush you. That's not even the bait yet. They were waiting in the shadows behind a popular club. It smelled like trash. Katsuki wanted out of here as soon as possible, and ideally, a good shower. Oh. He responded. Really fast, too. Let me see. Katsuki peeked over the other boy's shoulder as he read it out loud. Okay, he said. The girls? Which girls? Oh, never mind. I'm totally in. Are they super wasted? I bet they need help. Where are you? Geez, really, Mineta? Izuku smirked as Katsuki did. This purple pervert was too easy to bait. Izuku sent the next message, already using their full bait plan. Great. We're at the Highway Club off of 3rd Street. You can't miss it. I really need your help. Thanks, Mineta. They waited outside the club for a few minutes, Izuku sneaking around the corner to look for the purple pervert every once in a while, as Katsuki meanwhile hid in the shadows. It didn't take much time at all for him to show, all bounding down the sidewalk literally drooling. Mineta pretty much met every one of Katsuki's underwhelming expectations for him. As soon as he got there, Izuku ushered him around the corner, away from the main entrance. They didn't actually want to cause a scene. Katsuki made sure to stay out of sight, hidden behind the large trash dumpster, but he was still close enough where he could hear them. I'm here. Where are the girls, Midoriya? Hi, Mineta. Izuku genuinely sounded warm and friendly. They are inside. I've called a few cabs so each of us can get them home safely. Can you help me call their parents so they know we're coming? Here it was, the ultimate test. Izuku and he ran through a number of scenarios throughout the week and ultimately landed on this one. Mineta's response to this situation would be the ultimate demonstration of how far he would go to take advantage of the girls he so desperately wanted. Katsuki could even tell in the first few words that Mineta had failed. Oh, you know what, Midoriya? I don't know if that's necessary. Oh. Izuku paused long enough that Katsuki questioned what was happening. He couldn't quite see them, though he could hear them loud and clear. If he knew Izuku, though, he knew just as well as Katsuki did that this was it. What do you mean, Mineta? Don't you think we should call to let them know we're coming? Some of these girls are really drunk, Mineta. Yeah. The purple pervert's squeaky voice made Katsuki want to strangle something. Well, it's just that. That's not really necessary, is it? You said that you called multiple cabs, right? Dart. Right. Well. So I'll take one with a girl or two, and you take your own, right? Exactly, and then we'll get them home. So you don't need to worry about what's going on in my cab, do you, Midoriya? What do you mean? Oh, come on, Midoriya. Don't tell me it hadn't crossed your mind. What hasn't crossed my mind? Izuku sounded like he was between frustrated and genuinely upset. If it were up to Katsuki, they would have done the deed already so that Izuku wouldn't actually have to hear someone he had perceived to be his peer say it out loud. Drunk girls, Midoriya. Drunk girls too wasted to stand up. I can touch them all I want, oof. A slapping sound echoed across the otherwise empty alleyway. The purple pervert stopped talking mid-sentence, though he cried out for half a second before that was muffled. Katsuki took it to be the sign that it was his turn now. He stepped out from behind the dumpster serving as his hiding spot and found the purple pervert held up against the wall by a furious Izuku. Mineta was clearly trying to say something or yell out, but Izuku had him by the throat tight enough to let no air or words escape. You had your chance. Izuku hissed in a low voice, his face scrunched in anger. All week you had your chance, or maybe even your whole life up until now. You've had all this time to redeem yourself, to try to be a better person. But now you've chosen your own death. Katsuki watched as Mineta's eyes lit up in fear. He did a double take at the blonde's approach, looking ever more frightened. Izuku wasn't letting him get a word out though, probably for stealth so no one would hear him scream, but it was also likely that Izuku was literally trying to strangle him. Look, I'm not complaining here, Katsuki droned as he approached, pulling out his knife. But can I at least get a taste? Izuku turned his head towards the blonde, but didn't take his eyes off of purple pervert. Fury raged in his eyes, even Katsuki didn't want to mess with that. It was a heated few seconds as Izuku held on tight and Mineta made pitiful choking noises. Eventually though, Izuku lowered purple pervert to the ground, though he kept one hand around his throat and another covering his mouth to stop any screaming. Fine. Let's just get this over with. I have nothing more to say to him. Katsuki sneered and bent down, careful not to touch anything he didn't have to. Both he and Izuku were already wearing gloves and shoe coverings, but they of course had to be careful. He and Izuku both looked down at the choking boy as Katsuki's knife met his neck. Izuku thoughtfully put the boy down on flat cardboard already there on the ground, so the blood splatter would be easy to clean up. Mineta didn't make a noise as he died, neither of the other boys let him. Katsuki liked feeling the last drops of life leave the perverted boy, knowing that he would never touch or hurt those girls again. The dumpster was a fitting place for the body. The police or whoever could find it later, neither of them really cared. Katsuki easily destroyed the bloody cardboard pieces with his quirk, and took care of their shoe coverings and gloves when they got closer to home. They didn't communicate much on the trip back home, but Katsuki could only imagine Izuku was feeling the same as him. Relief, more than anything else. Now they could deal with everything else giving them trouble and didn't have to worry so much about having a vile classmate. Now they only had to deal with Ibag's bastard. Well, that on top of actually making it through high school. Okay, first 2 parts up. I am going to try and get the next 2 up tomorrow, but no promises. Anyways, I very much hope you enjoyed, and as the meme gods always say, be gay and do cry.